Greetings everybody, welcome back to Moonlight Productions. Today, it's the 11th state to join the Union, New York, or the Empire State. Side note, I usually try not to jab my opinion on something on my channel, but I think New York State nickname is, in my opinion, the best state nickname in the country. New York is also home to the largest city in the United States, New York City. New York City is one of the most significant areas in the nation when it comes to such a large economy. The theaters of Broadway, and one of the most important clusters of culture not only in the United States but also around the world. Over 8.38 million people live in the New York City area, according to the 2020 census. Many people also live in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut, and those residents will commute to the Big Apple to work in the area. When it comes to the history of the colony of New York, the British initially founded the area in 1624. 2 years later, the sites of Amsterdam and Manhattan Island were founded. Finally, 4 years later, the English conquered the area and the place was later renamed New York. Later in the state's history, the state would play a vital role in the American Revolution. When the state was admitted, New York City became a massive hub for many immigrants looking for a new life in a new country. Millions had seen the famous Statue of Liberty as they would arrive in New York City in only 50 years. As a result, New York became one of the most diverse locations in America. And with many people living in the city, there's a reason why New York has also been called a melting pot. From 1810 to 1960, New York had the largest population in the nation until the 1960 census, when California had eclipsed it in population. Later in the 1990 census, New York would place third, behind Texas, and most recently in 2020, Florida took the third largest position, and now New York is the fourth largest in the nation. New York was admitted into the Union as the 11th state on July 26, 1788. New York is also the 30th largest state in terms of landmass, and as I just previously mentioned, New York has the fourth largest population in the nation. A little over 19.2 million people call the Empire State home, or about 5.72% of the US population. The state capital of New York is also its oldest recorded city, Albany. Albany was initially founded by the British in 1686. The state's capital has a population of a little over 95,000 residents. That makes Albany the 32nd largest state capital. Over the years, New York has been declining in popularity and doesn't show any time in slowing down. The state has been losing more and more residents throughout the last couple of years. But New York State in general isn't 100% horrible, so join me as Moonlight Productions presents the 5 good and bad about New York State. The fifth worst thing about New York is the weather. Weather is known to be very cold during the winter. Places like Buffalo are considered the snowiest city in the nation. The rest of the state is also quite cold and snowy when you live in other northern places in New York. New York City can also get very challenging. Despite being near the ocean to help mitigate some of the cold, it makes the area more suffering for those who can't tolerate the cold. One of the best stories from a family member about the New York cold was about him and his friends shriveling in a McDonald's after exiting the New York City shoreline from scuba diving. The workers vilified him and his friends because of the cold water that drenched the floors. Thankfully, the state isn't so blistering hot during the summer, and you can still enjoy all the seasons throughout most of the state. Number 4, the state is rude. Rudeness in New York is about as common as breathing in the state. Numbers differ from source to source, but someone looks at places considered rude and tolerating other people. New York is one of the first places that comes to mind in rudeness. An estimated 15% of the New York population is considered rude per capita. New York is already top 5 in the nation, even number 1 depending on your source. The state is also not immune to aspects like rude drivers. I can personally vouch, having been in the New York City traffic before, it's one of the most miserable places to be in if you treat others with respect. An estimated 5% of New York drivers are labeled rude, which seems tame from my perspective, but all in all, you should not be in the New York City traffic. It is so cluttered that cops have to be on horses in order to get to an area of emergency going on in the area. Number 3, it's crowded and noisy. Most of this issue takes place in New York City, obviously. New York City has a little over 27.7 thousand people per square mile. Sure, multiple times more people visit New York City instead of living there, but tourists contribute a lot to the population density. In addition, New York City is also the largest central city in the US, nearly twice as dense as the second place city, which is San Francisco in California. Many people don't have the money to get a car, so many go on public transport, and the city is still overly packed. The term gridlock had formed because of New York City. From my humble perspective, being in a car while in New York City is absolutely brutal. The congestion can trace the reason New York City is also known as the city that never sleeps. It's such a hustle and bustle city that it can drain your stamina. It will help if you decide to pre-plan your schedule when traveling through New York City. Number 2, the cost of living. It's not just New York City. New York as a state in general is relatively pricey. Sure, New York City in general is the main contributor to the cost of living being so sky high in the state, but the rest of New York is still on the lower side cost of living. As if in the second quarter of 2022, New York's cost of living is on average 36.8% above the national average. The states that outrank New York in the cost of living is places like California, Massachusetts, DC, if you count as a state, and the state of Hawaii. Or to make everything more straightforward, if you have $100 in your pocket, that money is an actual value of $86.36. The cost of groceries in New York is 12% higher than the national average. Housing is 91% higher, transportation is 11.6% higher, healthcare is 5% higher, and the miscellaneous is 5% higher. The only stat that's lower is utilities, and that's only 0.5% lower than the national average. Case in point, if you like your money, it might be best to choose another state. It's going to eat through your wallet. And the worst thing about New York, the taxes. This aspect is a no shocker. New York State has become one of the harshest places in the nation when it comes to your taxes. Income tax is vicious. Even on the low end, you're going to be paying 6 to 7% of your income in taxes, which can get as high as almost 11% if you're making $25 million as of recent times. Then you have to deal with the sales tax, which is about 8.52% on average. The number does get drastically higher if you live in New York City. You're going to have to fork over a little more when it comes to living in the Big Apple. After that, you also have to pay a significant amount of money in your property taxes. The average cost of your yearly property taxes in New York State is a little over $5,400 a year. Those are some ball-kicking numbers to chart off. That's one of the reasons I would never want to live in New York. So those are the obvious, real reasons why you should never live in New York. But if you're looking for reasons to move to New York, you should consider... The fifth best thing about New York State is the crime rate. New York City does have a lot of crime, other places as well like Buffalo, Albany, Syracuse, Rochester, etc. There are plenty of places in New York where the crime is not very good. However, per capita, New York State in general is pretty good, around 3,200 residents being the victim of a crime per 100,000 residents. The violent crime rate is also above average regarding other states. It's also lower than the national average regarding nonviolent crimes in New York. These crime scores result in New York getting into the top 10 safest states in the Union. Look at places outside of New York City like Nassau County, Suffolk County, and Winchester County, high-wage areas of New York that are very safe. Crime does get directly in New York City, but living in the site can be a safe option for those middle-class families. Number 4, the many activities. The main entertainment and culture, especially in New York City, are entirely outmatched in the United States. However, nothing beats the experience of being in places like Times Square, Broadway, the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, and the Empire State Building are just some of the locations you should see if you're in New York City if culture is in your blood. Of course, it would help if you'd spent more than a week visiting New York City because there's just so much to do. If there is something outside of New York City you want to do, you should make plans and visit many environmental locations that you can be at, as well as other large or medium-sized cities in New York. It's not all just New York City. Number 3, everything is on top of each other. New York is densely populated and less cluttered than other major cities around the world like Seoul, South Korea, or Mumbai, India. Because it's straightforward to get something and somewhere in a small amount of time in New York City. Retail shops, fast food restaurants, and fine dining places to go to are all that belong in New York City, so you won't need to worry about the horrific traffic in the Big Apple. You can also avoid dealing with incredibly high gas prices. Things being on top of each other is considered quite attractive to keep things moving, so it might be something to consider if you live in New York. Number 2, the good education. Like other states in the Atlantic area of the U.S., New York isn't a stranger to being solid to good regarding your professional education. The Empire State is around in the top 10 in the nation, although the education in New York is the 15th in terms of good quality. New York has around 37% of the residents with a bachelor's degree. Also, in addition, about 17% of the state has an advanced degree like a master's or a PhD degree. Meanwhile, the K-12 education is about middle of the road, 25th place. The state has the 10th lowest score on kids with a degree, with around 87% having a degree. The average is 90% in the US. You should think about education in New York. At worst, it's solid. At best, it's in the top 10 states in the nation. And the best thing about New York State is the diversity scene. When it comes to the history of what New York is all about, the United States is already a very well-known melting pot. However, New York is one of the most giant prominent melting pots. In New York, as mentioned before, millions had gazed upon the Statue of Liberty to signal that they were about to experience a brand new life in the United States. Only about 61% of the state is white alone. Meanwhile, the minority population is about 39% of the state population. Easily one of the most populated states in the Union. If you want a diversity in your daily life, then consider living in the Empire State. So that's it. Those are the top 5 reasons you should or should not live in New York State. If you have any other mentions of why you should or shouldn't live in the Empire State, please type them down in the comments section down below. While you're at it, please like this video, subscribe to Moonlight Productions if you haven't already. Please follow me on Twitter, share the video. Anything goes to really help expand my channel. I have been working on being able to get more videos out consistently. I'm a one-man show, and I appreciate anyone who likes watching my content. Thank you so much for your time, and take care of yourself. Bye.